Shanice's hands trembled as she pressed her ear against the cold metal door of the industrial freezer in the mansion's basement. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, a faint scratching sound, barely audible over the hum of the refrigeration units. But then she heard it again. A whimper. A child's whimper. Her breath caught in her throat as she grabbed the heavy handle, her mind racing. No one was supposed to be down here. The basement storage was off limits to most of the staff, accessible only to the head housekeeper, and the handle wouldn't budge. Someone had locked it from the outside. "Hello?" Shanice called out, her voice cracking. "Is someone in there?" The whimpering grew louder, more desperate. Two voices now, two children. Shanice's blood ran cold as she recognized those voices. She'd tucked those boys into bed countless times, read them stories, wiped their tears. Lucian Blackwell's sons, the heirs to the most powerful crime family in New York, and someone had locked them in a freezer to die. What would you do if you discovered a terrible secret that could cost you your life? Shanice is about to make a choice that will change everything. Keep watching to see how a maid with nothing to lose becomes the only thing standing between two innocent children and a cold-blooded killer. 3 weeks earlier, Shanice Coleman had stood in the kitchen of the Blackwell mansion, her dark brown hands gripping the edge of the marble counter as she tried to process what the head housekeeper had just told her. "You'll be assigned to the family wing," Mrs. Chen had said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Mr. Blackwell specifically requested someone trustworthy to care for his sons while the nanny is away." Shanice's heart had hammered in her chest. In the 6 months she'd worked at the mansion, she'd barely seen Lucian Blackwell. The man was a ghost, disappearing into his office before dawn, returning after midnight, his presence marked only by the trail of terrified staff members and the occasional raised voice behind closed doors. Everyone knew what he was, what he did. The tailored suits and penthouse views couldn't hide the blood on his hands. "Why me?" Shanice had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Chen had given her a long look. "Because you keep your head down and your mouth shut. That's exactly what Mr. Blackwell needs." Now, as Shanice climbed the marble staircase to the 3rd floor, her worn sneakers silent on the plush carpet runner, she wondered if she'd made a mistake accepting this position. She needed the money desperately. Her grandmother's medical bills were drowning her, and this job paid 3 times what she'd made at her previous housekeeping position. But money meant nothing if you didn't live to spend it. The family wing was quieter than she'd expected. Shanice pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into a world that seemed impossibly removed from the cold, sterile halls below. Here the walls were painted in warm creams and soft blues. Toys were scattered across an expensive rug. 2 small beds sat opposite each other, their covers rumpled and unmade. "You're the new maid?" Shanice jumped, spinning around to find a small boy standing in the doorway of the bathroom. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with dark curly hair that fell into intelligent grey eyes, eyes that looked far too knowing for a child. "I'm Shanice," she said gently, crouching down to his level. "What's your name?" "Marcus." The boy studied her with an intensity that reminded her unnervingly of his father. "Are you going to leave too?" "Leave? Everyone leaves." A smaller voice piped up from behind Marcus. Another boy emerged, maybe 5 years old, clutching a stuffed lion. "Daddy says it's because we're bad." Shanice's heart clenched. "You're not bad," she said firmly, "and I'm not going anywhere." The words were out before she could stop them, and she saw something shift in Marcus's expression, a flicker of hope, quickly hidden behind a mask of distrust. "That's what they all say," Marcus muttered, but there was less conviction in his voice now. Shanice spent the rest of the morning getting to know the boys. Marcus was sharp and guarded, testing her with questions and watching her reactions carefully. The younger one, Elijah, was softer, more openly affectionate, though she could see the fear lurking behind his wide eyes. Neither boy mentioned their mother, and Shanice didn't ask. It was late afternoon when she first saw Lucian Blackwell up close. She'd been helping Elijah build a tower of blocks when the door opened and a man stepped into the room. Shanice froze. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark suit perfectly. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Grey, like Marcus's, but colder. Harder, eyes that had seen death and dealt it without hesitation. "Daddy!" Elijah scrambled to his feet and ran toward his father. Lucian caught his son easily, lifting him into his arms with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything Shanice had heard about him. "Hey, little man, you being good?" "Yes, Shanice is teaching us to build really tall towers." Those cold grey eyes shifted to her, and Shanice felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. She stood slowly, clasping her hands in front of her to hide their trembling. "You're the new housekeeper," Lucian said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. Shanice Coleman." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Shanice was acutely aware of how she must look, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform neat but worn, her deep brown skin marked by the exhaustion of working 2 jobs before landing this position. "Mrs. Chen speaks highly of you," Lucian said finally. "My sons need consistency, stability. Can you provide that?" "I'll do my best, sir." "Your best?" He set Elijah down gently. "In this house, Miss Coleman, your best might be the difference between life and death. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Shanice swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good." He brushed a hand over Marcus's hair as the older boy approached more cautiously. "I'll be away on business for the next week. You'll be staying in the room adjacent to theirs. Anything they need, anything at all. You come to me directly. Not Mrs. Chen, not security, me." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. Shanice took it with shaking fingers, noting the single phone number embossed on the heavy cardstock. "That line reaches me 24 hours a day," Lucian continued. "Use it if necessary." "Yes, sir." He kissed both boys on the forehead, murmured something in Italian that made Marcus smile slightly, and then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and danger. Shanice released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "He's scary," Elijah whispered, climbing back onto her lap. "But he's nice to us." "He kills people," Marcus added matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "But only bad people. That's what Uncle Dante says." Shanice's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to smile. "How about we finish that tower?" The week passed faster than Shanice expected. She fell into a rhythm with the boys. Wake them at 7, breakfast at 8, lessons with their private tutor from 9 to noon, lunch, outdoor time in the secured courtyard, quiet time, dinner, bath, and bed by 8. She learned that Marcus had nightmares about his mother, who had died 2 years ago in what the staff whispered was a rival family's attack. She learned that Elijah was terrified of the dark and slept with 4 nightlights. She learned that both boys were starving for affection, for someone who would stay, and despite every instinct telling her to keep her distance, to remember that these were the children of a monster, Shanice felt herself falling in love with them. It was on the 7th night, as she was tucking Elijah into bed, that everything changed. The door to the suite opened, and a woman walked in. She was stunning, tall and blonde, with the kind of beauty that belonged on magazine covers. Her red dress probably cost more than Shanice made in a year, and diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. "Oh," the woman said, her blue eyes sweeping over Shanice with barely concealed disdain. "You're the help." Shanice straightened, feeling every inch of the distance between them. "I'm Shanice, the boy's caregiver." How quaint. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Veronica Ashford, Lucian's fiancée." The word hit Shanice like a physical blow, though she couldn't understand why. She had no claim on Lucian Blackwell, no reason to care who he married. "The boys should be in bed," Shanice said carefully. "I'm aware of the schedule." Veronica walked to Marcus's bed, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She looked down at the boy with an expression that made Shanice's skin crawl. "Hello, Marcus." "Hi," Marcus said coldly. "Still the charmer, I see." Veronica turned to Elijah, who had buried his face in his pillow. "And little Elijah. So shy." "They're tired," Shanice said, moving between Veronica and the boys instinctively. "Perhaps you could visit tomorrow." Veronica's eyes hardened. "Perhaps you could remember your place." The tension in the room was suffocating. Shanice held her ground, her heart pounding, until Veronica finally laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "I'll be seeing a lot more of you," Veronica said, heading for the door. "I'm moving in next week. After all, I'll soon be the lady of this house, and these boys' stepmother." She left, but her presence lingered like poison in the air. Marcus sat up in bed. "I don't like her." "Me neither," Elijah whispered. Shanice wanted to agree, but instead she said, "Sometimes it takes time to get to know people." But as she turned off the lights and retreated to her own small room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had just begun. Veronica Ashford has just entered the picture, and she's already making enemies. But why does she look at those innocent children with such hatred? What is she planning? Keep watching to discover the dark truth behind the perfect fiancée's smile. Veronica moved into the mansion 3 days later, and the atmosphere changed immediately. The staff walked on eggshells, speaking in whispers. The boys became quieter, more withdrawn, and Shanice found herself constantly on edge, hyper-aware of every movement, every sound. Lucien returned from his business trip the same day Veronica arrived. Shanice watched from the third-floor window as his black SUV pulled up to the mansion, flanked by 2 more vehicles filled with security. He emerged in his usual dark suit, looking tired and dangerous. Veronica practically flew down the front steps to greet him, throwing her arms around his neck. From this distance, they looked like the perfect couple, beauty and power, wealth and status. But Shanice noticed how Lucien's body remained rigid, how he didn't quite return Veronica's embrace with the same enthusiasm. "Shanice!" She turned to find Marcus standing behind her, his small face creased with worry. Elijah won't stop crying. Shanice hurried to the boys' bathroom, where she found the 5-year-old huddled in the corner, tears streaming down his face. His stuffed lion lay abandoned on the floor. "Hey, baby, what's wrong?" She knelt beside him, and he immediately threw his arms around her neck. "She said mean things," Elijah sobbed into her shoulder. "She said we're going to go away forever." "Who said that?" "Miss Veronica." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his jaw set. "She came in while you were making lunch. She told Elijah that once she married Dad, she was sending us to boarding school in Europe, that Dad didn't really want us anymore." Rage flooded through Shanice, hot and protective. "That's not true," she said fiercely, pulling back to look at both boys. "Your father loves you very much." "Then why is he marrying her?" Marcus demanded, his voice cracking. "She hates us, anyone can see it." Shanice had no answer for that. Instead, she gathered both boys close and held them while Elijah cried himself into exhaustion. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Shanice made a decision that could cost her everything. She took the card Lucien had given her and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. "Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell, this is Shanice Coleman. I'm sorry to bother you, but—" "Are the boys all right?" His voice sharpened with concern. "Physically, yes, but I need to speak with you about something that happened today." There was a pause. "I'm in my office, 3rd floor, East Wing. Come now." The line went dead. Shanice's hands shook as she checked on the boys one more time, then made her way through the quiet mansion. The East Wing was even more luxurious than the family quarters, all dark wood and leather. She found the office easily. Light spilled from under the heavy door. She knocked softly. "Enter." Lucien sat behind a massive desk, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or assessment. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the chair across from him. Shanice sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Up close, in the soft light of the office, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weariness in his shoulders. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Tell me," he said simply. So she did. She told him about Veronica's visit, about what she'd said to Elijah, about the fear she saw in both boys' eyes. As she spoke, she watched his expression darken, his jaw tightening with each word. When she finished, the silence was deafening. "Thank you," Lucien said finally, his voice deadly quiet, "for telling me, for protecting them." "They're good boys," Shanice said softly. "They deserve to feel safe in their own home." His eyes met hers, and for a moment She saw past the cold exterior to something raw and vulnerable beneath. Their mother used to say the same thing. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "Most people think I got what I deserved. Crime boss loses his wife to the very violence he perpetuates. Poetic justice." "I don't know what you deserve," Shanice said honestly, "but I know those boys deserve better than to be caught in the crossfire of adult decisions." Lucien studied her for a long moment, and Shanice felt stripped bare under his gaze. She was acutely aware of the vast differences between them, his power and her vulnerability, his wealth and her poverty, his whiteness and her blackness. In any other world, they would never have spoken like this. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. "I'm terrified of you," Shanice corrected, "but I'm more afraid of what will happen to Marcus and Elijah if no one speaks up for them." Something shifted in his expression, respect maybe, or surprise. "I'll handle Veronica," he said. "She won't bother the boys again." "And the boarding school?" "There is no boarding school." His voice turned hard. "My sons stay with me, always." Relief flooded through Shanice. "Thank you." She stood to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Miss Coleman." She turned back. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "They're not your children. This is just a job." Shanice thought about her answer carefully. "Because somebody has to," she said finally, "and because they remind me that even in the darkest places, there's still innocence worth protecting." She left before he could respond, but she felt his eyes on her all the way to the door. The next morning, Shanice woke to raised voices from somewhere in the mansion. She checked on the boys, still sleeping peacefully, and then crept toward the sound. "Absolutely unacceptable," Lucien's voice cold and furious. "Those children are off limits. If you ever speak to them like that again—" "Oh, please!" Veronica's laugh was cruel. "You act like they're made of glass. They need to toughen up if they're going to survive in this world. They're 5 and 7 years old. Exactly. Old enough to learn their place, and that place is not between us, Lucien. I won't play second fiddle to a dead woman's children." The sound of something shattering made Shanice jump. "Get out," Lucien said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Get out before I forget myself." "You don't mean that. Don't test me, Veronica. Not today." Footsteps approached, and Shanice barely had time to duck into an alcove before Veronica stormed past, her face twisted with rage. She looked toward where Shanice was hiding, and for a moment their eyes met. The hatred in Veronica's gaze was absolute. Then she was gone, heels clicking violently against the marble floor. Shanice released a shaky breath and hurried back to the family wing. She had made an enemy today, she knew. A dangerous one. But as she watched Marcus and Elijah sleep, their small faces peaceful in the morning light, she knew she'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth fighting for. The battle lines have been drawn and Veronica is furious. A woman scorned is dangerous, but a woman scorned by a Mafia boss? That's deadly. What will she do to get her revenge? Keep watching to see how far Veronica will go to eliminate anyone who stands in her way. 2 weeks passed in uneasy peace. Veronica kept her distance from the boys, though Shanice often caught her watching them with cold calculation. Lucien spent more time in the family wing, joining them for breakfast and reading bedtime stories when his schedule allowed. Shanice tried to ignore how her heart raced whenever he entered the room, how she found herself looking for him without meaning to. It was dangerous territory, this growing awareness of him as a man rather than just an employer. She saw the way he looked at his sons with fierce love, the way his hard edges softened around them. She saw how he always poured her coffee exactly the way she liked it, how he asked about her grandmother's health, how he noticed when she was tired and arranged for one of the other staff to take over so she could rest. It was the small kindnesses that undid her, the glimpses of humanity beneath the monster. "You're playing with fire," Mrs. Chen warned her one afternoon. They were in the kitchen, and the older woman's eyes were shrewd. "I see how you look at him. Don't lie to yourself, and don't forget what he is. Men like Lucien Blackwell don't fall in love with the help. They use them and discard them." Shanice knew she was right, but knowing and feeling were two different things. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything started to unravel. Shanice had taken the boys to the courtyard for their outdoor time, while Veronica was supposedly at a spa appointment, and Lucien was in a meeting with his lieutenants. They'd been playing for maybe 20 minutes when Marcus suddenly stopped, his face going pale. "Where's Elijah?" Shanice's heart dropped. She spun around, scanning the courtyard. The 5-year-old had been right there, building a sandcastle. Now he was gone. "Elijah!" she called, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Elijah, honey, where are you?" "He was just here," Marcus said, his voice rising. "He was right here." Shanice ran through the courtyard, checking behind every bush and bench. The gate was still locked. There was no way he could have gotten out. But where? A scream pierced the air. Shanice's blood turned to ice. She grabbed Marcus's hand and ran toward the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs. They found Elijah near the koi pond, sobbing hysterically. His left arm hung at an odd angle, and blood streamed from a cut on his forehead. "Baby, what happened?" Shanice dropped to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she examined his injuries. "She pushed me," Elijah wailed. "The pretty lady pushed me." "What pretty lady?" But even as Shanice asked, she knew. "Marcus, run and get your father, now." Marcus took off like a shot, while Shanice carefully lifted Elijah, trying not to jostle his injured arm. The little boy was shaking, his brown eyes wide with shock and pain. By the time she got him inside, Lucien was already there, his face a mask of cold fury. "What happened?" "His arm is broken," Shanice said, her voice shaking. "And he says someone pushed him." "Who?" "The pretty lady," Elijah sobbed. "Miss Veronica. She said I was a mistake. She said we're all mistakes." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Lucian's eyes went flat and dead, the eyes of a killer. "Get him to Dr. Ricci," he ordered one of his security team. "Now, and find Veronica." As the guard took Elijah, the little boy reached for Shanice. "Don't leave me." "I'm coming with you," she promised, looking to Lucien for permission. He nodded once sharply. "Go. I'll handle this." The next few hours were a blur of emergency rooms and X-rays and a frightened 5-year-old who wouldn't let go of Shanice's hand. The break was clean, the doctor said. It would heal. But the fear in Elijah's eyes, that might take longer. By the time they returned to the mansion, it was after midnight. Shanice carried the sleeping boy upstairs, Marcus trailing behind them with dark circles under his eyes. Lucien was waiting in the family wing. He took Elijah from her arms gently, carrying his son to bed, and tucking him in with a tenderness that made Shanice's throat tight. "Where's Veronica?" she asked quietly, once both boys were settled. "Gone." Lucien's voice was flat. "And she won't be coming back." "Did you—" Shanice couldn't finish the question. "No." He looked at her and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. "Though I wanted to. But I have my sons to think about. I can't risk prison, not when they need me." He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. In that moment, he didn't look like a feared crime boss. He looked like a tired father carrying too much weight. Shanice moved without thinking, crossing to him and placing a hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her, startled. "You're a good father," she said softly. "Those boys are lucky to have you." Something cracked in his expression. "I almost lost him today. If you hadn't been there, but I was there, and he's safe now." Lucien's hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his shoulder. His palm was warm, calloused. "How do you do it?" he asked roughly. "How do you stay so strong?" "I'm not strong," Shanice admitted. "I'm terrified most of the time, but those boys need someone who won't fall apart, so I don't." "You're remarkable." The words were barely a whisper, but they hit her like a thunderbolt. Their eyes met, and Shanice saw something shift in his gaze, something dangerous and intoxicating. He stood slowly, and suddenly the space between them felt charged, electric. "Mr. Blackwell." "Lucien," he corrected, his voice rough. "When we're alone, call me Lucien." "Lucien," she repeated, and watched his eyes darken at the sound of his name on her lips. "This isn't— we can't—" "I know." He reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek so gently she barely felt it. "But God help me, Shanice, I can't stop thinking about you." Before she could respond, before she could process what was happening, a crash echoed from somewhere below them. They sprang apart, the moment shattered. Lucien was instantly alert. his hand moving to the gun holstered at his hip. "Stay with the boys," he ordered. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Then he was gone, moving with predatory grace toward whatever danger awaited. Shanice did as he'd commanded, locking the door and positioning herself between the beds and any potential threat. Marcus stirred slightly but didn't wake. Elijah slept on, his small face peaceful despite the cast on his arm. Minutes crawled by like hours. Shanice's heart hammered so loudly she was sure it would wake the boys. Then voices shouting, a gunshot that made her flinch. Silence. The doorknob rattled, and Shanice's breath caught. "Shanice!" Lucian's voice, tight and controlled. "Open the door." She recognized his voice, but some instinct made her hesitate. "What did you say to me in your office the night I told you about Veronica?" A pause. "I said you weren't afraid of me and you corrected me. You said you were terrified, but you were more afraid of what would happen to the boys if no one spoke up." Relief flooded through her, and she unlocked the door. Lucian stepped inside and she gasped. There was blood on his shirt, though he didn't seem injured. What happened? Veronica came back. His jaw was tight. She had 3 men with her. Hired guns from a rival family. They're gone now. Dead? 2 are. 1 will wish he was. He looked at his son sleeping peacefully, and something vulnerable crossed his face. She was going to kill them, Shanice. All of us. She had it planned. If I hadn't heard them break in. Shanice's legs gave out, and she sank onto Marcus's bed. The reality of how close they'd come to death hit her all at once. Lucian knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "You're safe now. I swear to you, you're safe." "What about Veronica?" "My people are hunting her. She won't get far." His hands tightened on hers. "But until we find her, I need you and the boys somewhere secure. I have a safe house upstate. You'll leave in the morning." "And you?" "I have to finish this." Fear clutched at her chest, fear for him, though she had no right to that fear. "What if something happens to you?" "Then you'll take care of my sons." He said it simply, as if it were already decided. "I've arranged everything. Papers, money, a new identity. If I don't come back, you take them and you run. You give them the life they deserve." "Lucian, promise me, Shanice." His grey eyes bore into hers. "Promise me you'll protect them. I promise." The words came out as a whisper. "But you have to promise me something too. Come back. Come back to them. To—" She cut herself off before she could say "to me." But he heard it anyway. She could see it in his eyes. "Shanice," he said roughly, and then his hand was cupping her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "If I survive this, if we get through this, I—" "Don't," she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "Then I'll make you a promise I can keep." He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "I will do everything in my power to come back, because for the first time in years, I have something to come back to." He kissed her then, soft and achingly gentle, and Shanice felt her carefully constructed walls crumble to dust. This was madness. This was dangerous. This was everything she shouldn't want. But God, she wanted it anyway. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucian stood and adjusted his shirt. The cold mask had slipped back into place, but Shanice could still see the man beneath. "Get some rest," he said, his voice carefully neutral now. "We leave at dawn." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with 2 sleeping boys and a heart that had just signed its own death warrant. Because she'd fallen in love with Lucian Blackwell. And in his world, love was the most dangerous thing of all. Everything is about to change. Veronica is still out there, hungry for revenge. Lucian and Shanice have crossed a line they can never uncross. And somewhere in the darkness, a terrible plan is already in motion. Keep watching to discover the shocking truth that will change everything. The safe house was a sprawling estate, hidden in the Catskill Mountains, surrounded by dense forest and protected by a state-of-the-art security system. Shanice spent 3 days there with the boys, jumping at every sound, checking the locks obsessively. Lucian called every night, his voice tight with exhaustion. "We're close," he'd tell her. "Just a few more days." But on the 4th night, he didn't call. Shanice tried his number a dozen times, her panic rising with each unanswered ring. Marcus noticed, his young face creasing with worry. "Is Dad okay?" "I'm sure he's fine," Shanice lied, even as her mind conjured 1,000 horrible possibilities. "He's probably just busy." That night she barely slept. She lay in bed, straining to hear any sound that might signal danger. The security team Lucian had left them said everything was fine, but Shanice couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It was 2 a.m. when she finally gave up on sleep and decided to make tea. She just turned on the kettle when she heard it, a faint beeping from somewhere in the house. Her blood ran cold. That was the sound of the security system being disarmed. But the guards hadn't mentioned anyone coming. Shanice's hands shook as she grabbed the kitchen knife from the block. She crept toward the boys' room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hallway was dark and silent, too silent. She was 3 steps from the boys' door when she noticed it was slightly ajar. She always closed it completely, always. Shanice pushed the door open slowly, knife raised. The room was empty, both beds were empty. Panic seized her throat. "Marcus! Elijah!" No answer. She ran through the house, throwing open doors, screaming their names. The guards were nowhere to be found. The security monitors showed nothing but static. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. That's when she noticed the door to the basement standing open. Shanice had never been down there. The guards had said it was just storage, nothing important. But now, with her heart in her throat and terror coursing through her veins, she descended the stairs. The basement was vast and cold, filled with industrial shelving units and storage containers. In the back, she could see the outline of a massive freezer, the kind restaurants used. And that's when she heard it. A whimper, faint but unmistakable. She ran to the freezer and pressed her ear against the door. The scratching sound, the crying. 2 voices, Marcus and Elijah. "No, no, no," Shanice whispered, grabbing the handle. It was locked from the outside with a heavy padlock. She screamed in frustration, pulling at it uselessly. Then she saw the toolbox on a nearby shelf. She grabbed a crowbar and attacked the lock, tears streaming down her face. The metal bent, creaked, finally gave way. Shanice yanked the door open, and a wave of frigid air hit her. Inside, huddled together on the floor, were Marcus and Elijah. Their lips were blue, their small bodies shaking violently. "Oh God, babies, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." She pulled them out, wrapping them in her own jacket, rubbing their arms frantically. "How long have you been in there?" "I don't know," Marcus chattered. "The pretty lady came. She said she had a surprise for us. Then she locked us in." Veronica. Rage unlike anything Shanice had ever felt flooded through her. She was about to pick up both boys when she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Well, well," Veronica's voice drifted down, saccharine and poisonous. "The hero saves the day. How touching." Shanice turned, placing herself between the boys and Veronica. The blonde woman stood at the bottom of the stairs, a gun in her hand. "You really thought you could take him from me?" Veronica laughed. "You're nobody, just another black maid who doesn't know her place." "My place," Shanice said coldly, "is protecting these children, something you've proven you're incapable of. Those brats are the only thing standing between me and everything I deserve. With them gone, Lucian would have no choice but to—" "But to what?" Shanice interrupted. "Love you? You can't force someone to love you by killing their children, you psychopath." Veronica's face contorted with rage. She raised the gun, aiming it directly at Shanice's chest. Time seemed to slow down. Shanice could hear her own heartbeat, feel Marcus and Elijah clutching at her legs. She thought of Lucian, of his grey eyes and gentle touch. She thought of all the things she'd never get to say to him. "You should have stayed out of this," Veronica hissed, her finger tightening on the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Shanice braced for pain, for death, but it never came. Instead, Veronica crumpled to the ground, blood blooming across her chest. Behind her, gun still raised, stood Lucian Blackwell. He looked like death itself, face hard, eyes cold, clothes stained with blood. But when he saw his sons, when he saw Shanice, something cracked in his expression. "Daddy!" Elijah tried to run to him, but his legs were too weak from the cold. Lucian crossed the distance in seconds, dropping to his knees and gathering his sons into his arms. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice breaking. "I've got you, you're safe now." Then his eyes found Shanice. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "The guards?" he asked. "I don't know. They were gone when I woke up." She paid them off. Lucian's jaw tightened. "They're dead now. All of them. Every single person who helped her." There was no remorse in his voice, only cold satisfaction. This was the man everyone feared, the killer hiding beneath the father's mask. And Shanice wasn't afraid. "We need to get the boys warm," she said practically. "They were in that freezer for at least an hour." Lucian nodded and stood, lifting both boys with ease. "Come on, let's go home." He looked back at Veronica's body once, his expression unreadable. "I should have ended this weeks ago," he said quietly. "I should have protected them better." "You did protect them," Shanice said firmly. "You came, that's what matters." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted between them. This wasn't just employer and employee anymore. This wasn't even just a man and a woman drawn to each other. This was family. The ride back to Manhattan was silent, except for the boys' occasional sniffles. They were wrapped in heated blankets, but the trauma of what they'd endured would take longer to warm away. By the time they reached the mansion, dawn was breaking over the city. Lucian carried both boys inside, and Shanice followed, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "I'll call Dr. Ricci," she said. "They need to be checked." "Shanice!" Lucian's voice stopped her. He'd settled the boys on the couch, and now he turned to face her fully. "Thank you for saving them, for being brave when I couldn't be there." "I didn't." "You did." He crossed to her, his large hands framing her face. "You risked your life for my children. There are no words for what that means to me." "They're not just your children anymore," Shanice whispered, the truth of it hitting her. "I love them, I love—" She cut herself off, terrified of finishing that sentence, but Lucian heard it anyway. "Say it," he commanded softly. "Please, Shanice, say it." "I love them," she repeated, her eyes searching his. "And God help me, I love you too." His kiss was different this time, not gentle, but fierce and claiming. When he pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. "Something I should have said weeks ago." "What?" "I'm done. With the life, with the business. I've been planning my exit for months, ever since," he glanced at his sons, "since I realized they deserve a father who comes home every night. Not a monster who might end up dead or in prison." Shanice's eyes widened. "You're leaving the Mafia." "It's not that simple, but yes, I have one more meeting, one final deal to transfer power to my second in command, and then I'm out. For good." "What will you do?" A smile tugged at his lips. A real smile, warm and genuine. "I'm going to be boring. Invest in legitimate businesses. Take my sons to baseball games, maybe even learn to cook." "You cook?" "Don't sound so skeptical." His thumb traced her lower lip. "And I'm going to date a remarkable woman who saved my life and my sons' lives more times than I can count." Hope bloomed in Shanice's chest, fragile and terrifying. "Is that woman me? If she'll have me?" He grew serious. "I know what I'm asking. I know my past will always be there, that there will always be danger, that people will talk and judge. But Shanice, I am in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love with you. And I want to build a life with you, if you'll let me." Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm nobody," she whispered. "Just a maid with a high school diploma and a mountain of medical debt. You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone." His voice was fierce. "I want the woman who stood up to me when everyone else cowered. I want the woman who loves my sons like they're her own. I want the woman who saw past the monster to the man I could be. I want you, Shanice Coleman, just you." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it, love and fear and hope and desperation. When they broke apart, both boys were watching them with sleepy smiles. "Does this mean Shanice is staying forever?" Elijah asked hopefully. Lucian looked at her, his grey eyes soft. "What do you say? Want to stay forever?" Shanice looked at this broken, beautiful family. A former crime boss trying to find redemption, two traumatized boys learning to trust again, and herself, a woman who'd found love in the most unlikely place. "Yeah," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I do." Marcus and Elijah cheered, and for the first time since entering this mansion, Shanice felt like she was truly home. 6 months later, Shanice stood in the kitchen of a different house, a sprawling colonial in Connecticut, far from the dangerous world they'd left behind. Lucian had kept his promise. He'd gotten out, though the process had been neither clean nor easy. But they'd survived. Marcus and Elijah were in the backyard, their laughter drifting through the open window. They'd started at a new school and were thriving, their nightmares becoming less frequent. "Something smells amazing." Shanice turned to find Lucian in the doorway, his suit replaced by jeans and a t-shirt. He looked younger like this, happier. The hard edges had softened, though she knew they'd never fully disappear. "I'm making your grandmother's recipe, Anne," she said. "The one you told me about." His eyes softened. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She wiped her hands on her apron and crossed to him. "Besides, we're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Instead of answering, she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. It took him a moment to understand, and then his eyes went wide. "You're pregnant," she confirmed, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "About 8 weeks." Lucian's face transformed with wonder. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Are you happy?" He looked up at her, and she saw everything she needed to know in his eyes. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. He stood and kissed her deeply, and Shanice marveled at how far they'd come. From employer and employee to lovers to partners to now, a real family. "Marry me," Lucian said against her lips. "You've asked me 3 times already. My answer is still yes. I'll keep asking until there's a ring on your finger, and you've legally changed your name to Blackwell." "Is that your way of saying you have commitment issues?" He laughed, a sound she never got tired of hearing. "That's my way of saying I want the whole world to know you're mine, permanently." From the backyard, Marcus called out, "Dad, Shanice, come play with us." They looked at each other and smiled. Then, hand in hand, they went to join their sons in the sunshine. The darkness of their past would never fully disappear. There would always be shadows, always be whispers about who Lucian had been. But in this moment, in this life they'd built together, there was light. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for watching this incredible journey of love, courage, and redemption. If Shanice's bravery moved you, if Lucian's transformation inspired you, or if you're rooting for this beautiful family, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories. Drop a comment telling us, what would you have done in Shanice's position? Would you have risked everything for love? Let us know below. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next story. See you in the next one.